Here's a little secret that I used for years and years to paint trees, and it is using, it's called an artist sponge, and I got it, I think, just like at Michael's. You could get it on Amazon, art stores have them. But what it is it's kind of a little bit of a textured-y sponge, and it's shaped not like flat like you would for using it for the dishes. And so you can break it, you know, I kind of usually take even some chunks off of it, because as it comes in the store, it's a little bit too big to work with. So I like tearing it into smaller chunks like this. And then I'm gonna show you how we use this for creating trees and using it for the little tiny leaves everywhere. It's a great thing to use, and I love it because you can create trees extremely fast. So what we're gonna do is wet our paints first, and then you're still gonna use a brush to get the mixture on your palette of the colors you're wanting to dip your sponge into. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use a little bit of a lighter green. This is a green gold. I'm gonna mix a little bit of my Windsor green into that. And just a little bit of cat orange. Lemon yellow too, just to brighten that up a little for this first layer. So with this first layer, when I'm using the sponge, or just usually anything, I try to work light to dark. So I want it to be nice and bright. I also like to get the sponge wet first, kind of wring it out. You don't want it to be holding that water, dripping the water, but you do want it to be wet. And so the reason this works so good is you can see all the little tiny, I don't know, like the little things coming off of the sponge. I don't know what it's called, but that's what's gonna create this really cool leaf texture. So now I can get that paint mixture onto the sponge, and you can see how it's on there. And now I can come to my paper and start to get my tree shape formed on here. And you can see you're gonna go back and forth between your paint mixture, going in different directions, making sure to not fill in completely, because when you see trees outside, you see all those fun little gaps where the sky is coming through and all that kind of stuff. So we want to make sure that we don't fill anything in completely. We love these little tiny holes peeking through. Okay, and that looks good for a first pass. And again, if you have other ones too, you can kind of use a variety of them to get just a variety of markings on the paper, because depending on how you rip it and how it's formed, it's gonna give you a nice variation in there. So that's why it's sometimes nice to use two. So I might use this one on the second pass. So once we've got that down, this is kind of like that first layer. I'm gonna lightly sketch in my trunk now. And where those gaps are in our tree is kind of where our trunk is gonna, you know, be seen in all the branches and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so now that I have that sketched in, I'm gonna go ahead, and this is really the only place you're gonna use your brush, is to paint in the tree trunk area. Now, one thing you wanna do is make sure that this is dry, so I'm gonna dry that real fast, because once you put that trunk in, you are gonna be touching some of that leaf area that we colored in, and we don't want that to bleed together. So dry it real fast. And this is just like a craft DIY heat gun, I think is what I typed in on Amazon. I get asked about this all the time. It's just a nice little easy way to blow dry it. A blow dryer for your hair works just as well. But once it's dry, then we can go in and paint the trunk real quick. So I'm just gonna mix up a color real fast for my tree trunk. Okay, once we have that sketched in, now we can kind of come back and, well, I'm gonna put some grass in real fast down here on the ground. Okay, now I'm gonna start mixing up a little bit of a darker green color that we're gonna use our sponge for to come back and start to give some dimension to these leaves, because right now it's looking a little bit of flat. So we'll come back and mix up a little bit of a darker green. So I'm gonna still start with green gold, use a little bit of Windsor green, and a little bit of cad orange, more Windsor green, and now this is gonna be kind of like our mid value on the tree. So I don't wanna get too dark, because we're gonna do one final pass, getting really dark. So this is just kind of like a nice mid green, and I'm gonna try using this sponge and get it a little wet. And now same exact process, gonna dip it in the paint and then just kind of blot it around. Okay, and that looks pretty good for that pass. So you can see how fast the sponge is to create and to fill in a tree so quickly. I might actually put a few on the edging up in here. And then I might grab a little bit of green gold real quick, lemon yellow. And you can always rinse out your sponge whenever you're gonna switch colors, just dab it on your paper towel. Add a little bit of that in there. Okay, now with this final pass, while it's still a little bit wet, we're actually gonna put in our darker color. So I'm gonna grab some Windsor green. I'm gonna use a little bit of alizarin crimson, kind of get that a little darker, and a little bit of indigo. Now I'm gonna take my sponge and do the same thing with getting a little bit of this darker green now. And I'm gonna kind of stick to, when I'm putting in this darker final layer, I'm gonna kind of stick to a little bit of the left side, so it almost looks like the sun's coming from this direction, and a little bit on the bottom as well, because there's gonna be some shadow to get some darker leaves. And I think I'm just gonna even add a little bit more of a light green up in this area, just to really kind of show that that's where the sun is hitting this tree, and it's a little bit more warmed up. So you can go back and forth between like your different greens. Okay, and I think I'm gonna stop there. And then one last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna darken the left side of my tree trunk as well, just to help again show that the sun's coming from this direction and it's a little bit darker on this side. So I'm gonna dry this real fast. And then whatever kind of brown you use for the tree, just add a little bit of a darker value into it. So I like using a little bit of like indigo or ultramarine blue to get it a little bit darker. I'm actually going to switch brushes to a smaller brush, a little bit thinner. Okay, and then one last thing we could do is You can intermix using the sponge and your brush with this for creating your leaves. So I'm gonna just go and add a little bit of this darker green that we had and mix a little bit of that, more of that up because I was running low on it. And I'm just gonna dot in a few places a little bit of some of this darker, kind of just on the bottom in this kind of like arced motion. And then what you can do is you can take the sponge, and I'm not gonna have anything on it. You can take the sponge and just kind of dab that to soften it. And now you kind of got another little texture within those trees, and you're getting a little bit of some darker values going on. That can sometimes be hard to achieve with the sponge because it has water in it, so it kind of like lightens that value. And so I like getting some nice dark spots in these trees. And a great way to do that is to lay it in with your brush and then come back with the sponge and kind of just let that soften it. And I might just do the same with adding just a little bit of this lighter green, kind of just going back and forth between the greens at this point, just to have a nice variety. It's kind of more like a middle green. So the sponge works as a really nice tool. You don't have to do this with the paintbrush at the end. We could have just left it as is with just using the sponge. I just wanted to kind of show you kind of multiple ways that you can use the sponge. It's just such a fun tool to have in your supplies and kind of pull it out whenever you're doing trees, because trees can be so complex with all of the leaves and all that kind of stuff going on. I'm gonna do the same exact tree next to it, but doing like a fall tree, just to kind of show you guys what the process would look like. But I'm not gonna go through it step by step. I'll just kind of do a really quick speed ramp of it, just so that you can see doing the sponge and using the same exact process. All right, I finished the fall tree, and hopefully it was fun for you guys to see how simple it is to use these Artist Ocean sponges. They're relatively cheap too, and they last for a really long time. Like, I've had some of mine since college. And so it's a great thing to have in your toolbox, especially if you feel like you're struggling with trees right now. This is how I did trees for like a few years. Like I said at the beginning, it's something I just was like, this is a great way to get all of that texture in there and not feel like I'm painting every single leaf, and feel like you've got the essence of a tree and all of that stuff going on with that texture. So a really fun way to do that. One of my secret weapons when I'm needing to do trees. There's other ways now that I've been painting for so long that I can do trees with a brush, but this caught me by for a lot of years till I finally like learned how to do them with a brush and create texture. But I still even revert back to these, and you can see how I use both back and forth using the sponge and the brush. So there's still some thing I use all the time. So hopefully it was fun for you guys to see how to use these with trees, and you can use them for other stuff as well. This is just kind of one of the main things I use them for. I've actually used them for creating stuff within the sky, like some cloud textures. And so maybe we'll do a video doing that as well. Until then, I hope you guys enjoyed seeing this, and I will see you guys next time. Enjoy painting.